Hi, thank you for joining us for another episode of Coffee and Conversation podcast with alumni. My name is Diana Guzman Lugo. I'm the Career Services Coordinator at Candler School of Theology, and I'm also a current third year MDiv student. But before we get started, I'm going to let our guest, Julian, introduce himself.
Hey everyone, my name is Julian Davis Reid, class of 2019 with the MDiv from Candler School of Theology. I am a proud Candler alum and live here in Chicago, where I work in ministry through the arts. I am a musician, I'm a writer, I'm a speaker. I have a contemplative ministry called Notes of Rest, which you might have experienced at Candler because I've offered it many a time at Candler for students and the Emory ecosystem writ large. And so it's been a fantastic time with that. I also have a project now called Testify. I'm the artistic director with another Emory alum. I'm doing this project, Dr. Nick Peterson, who teaches worship and homiletics at Christian Theological Seminary. Testify is all about Black church testimony practice. And we're revitalizing that practice through artistic witness, with people creating in all kinds of ways to tell their God stories, and then also through digital storytelling to meet the moment. So those are the two main projects I have. And then I'm also a touring musician. I make original music, put out a record last year called Vocation. And I'm just thankful to be able to share in churches around the country, seminaries around the country, and in clubs around the country, the good work that God does through theology and the arts. It's wonderful to be here.
For those of you who don't know Julian, he just recently was announced one of Emory's 40 under 40. So that's really exciting, and we're really excited to have you with us. Before I ask you a bit about your current career and your many endeavors, I wanted to hear a little bit about your calling to ministry, your calling to seminary, what that journey was like for you, and why you chose Candler.
Absolutely. I was looking at various MDiv programs. One of the reasons Candler stuck out was I was thankful to be awarded the Woodruff Fellowship on the way in. And that was, funnily enough, a way that my wife Carmen was able to go to Emory Medical School. She was applying to medical programs concurrent with my seminary applications. And she hadn't heard back from Emory. And I was eyeing Emory and was looking and really like the Candler profile in terms of it being in the South. I really wanted to study, having grown up in Chicago, which Black folk in Chicago will often say, the difference between Chicago and Mississippi is just that Chicagoans wear coats. That Mississippians and coats are what make Black Chicago. So even though I had experience of the South of a sort up here, and then went to school in New England for undergrad at Yale, I knew it was going to be different than being in the South proper. And so I was really interested in studying Christianity and Christian formation and ministerial formation in the heart of the Bible Belt. So that was one reason I wanted to come to Candler. And then it being able to match up with Carmen, she ended up getting in at Emory Med because the admissions officer at the time for me here at Candler said, "Hey, Emory Med, can you look at Julian's wife's application because otherwise he won't come. We love for him to come." And they said, "Oh, sure." And at med school, they're not required to read every app. And so they get around to her app and they're like, "Oh, she's great." She ends up getting an Emory Med, and the rest is history. So that's part of why Candler. Interestingly enough, at the front end, Diana, I did not have many aspirations at all for the arts. Matter of fact, I was so focused on systematics and or being a local church pastor like my mama, who pastors here in the Northern Illinois Conference of the UMC, that I didn't even write about music in my essay. I wrote one little line about I could play in chapel piano if you need it. But that was really it. I was focused on race and systematics. And excuse me. And so that's how things started. But the last bit to what started to change things for me was I'm in school full time. And as God would have it, also matriculated into a band. So I matriculated into Canada, but also then started co-founded this band out in LA called the Juju Exchange. And that was my first foray as a professional original artist. I'd always been playing music for somebody else, playing church music, jazz standards in a club somewhere. But it was different to actually be making records, putting them out, trying to get placements on playlists on Spotify and iTunes and touring the country playing shows. So that's starting to happen in LA while I'm still a full-time student in Atlanta. And I had to figure out a way to understand for myself and narrate for myself, how do these go together? And that slow, difficult, but patient work is what would typify my time at Candler. More often than not, I was trying to hold together, what does it mean to be studying fourth century baptismal rites in the patristics, early Christianity classes, and then also turn around and be making tunes of wordless music in LA that I was playing in a club in San Francisco. How did those go together? Why was God having those happen at the same time? And I ended up with a concentration in scripture, theology, and the arts to answer that question. And would thread the needle throughout various classes, independent studies, final projects. I wrote an essay, a master's thesis on theology of jazz. And it was all immensely helpful for where I am now.
This is all really amazing and inspiring. The fact that you were able to handle both being in a band in LA and also being a full-time student, that's very impressive. Um, One of the things I was going to ask you about was you mentioned participating in playing with the chapel and the gospel choir, also in Black Student Caucus. How do you feel like your activities here at Candler helped you start to see this passion? Because you said you came in with the focus of systematics, you came in with the focus of race. How did those passions start to, I wouldn't, well, I don't know if you would say that they would necessarily change, but maybe they evolved into a way that all were encompassed.
Oh, man. So, one of the great things about Candler, in addition to the professors who are very encouraging and the assignments that are flexible to fit my budding interests in blending theology and music, was the strength of my classmates. And if I keep going, I may cry. There are so many people, some of whom now who work at Candler, Dean ABC, which is it's so funny to call her that. But she was just Allison to me at the time. But people like Allison Henderson Brooks or Eugene Williams or Richard Williams, Darren Sims, there are all kinds of classmates I had who called out the real in me. They called out the real. I remember after chapel, many a time Richard, Eugene, and I would gather and we'd pray around the piano, and I'd play and they'd pray. And that was my prayer, was playing. And that happened after many chapel services, particularly after in the second year. I remember going to South Africa and for some personal reasons, really struggling on that trip. And Allison helped me. She helped me become unmuzzled. She also helped me with my preaching class that last year. There are so many moments in going to people's church services, seeing folk get ordained, working in study groups together, conversations one on one, people pulling me to the side and say, "Hey, bro, you can't just be riding around here," which I would do. I was from New England. I went to Yale for undergrad. So I'm walking around, got my headphones on, listening to music all the time. And Alice, it was Allison. She pulled me to the side once and was like, "Bruh, this the South. You can't move like that around here. Slow down, take them phones off and talk to folk." I mean, there's like the list goes on of stories like that from people who would speak into my life, cats leading protests, risking their academic standing because of what was happening at Candler, what was happening at Emory, what was happening in the Atlanta community. I mean, just extraordinary stories. And all of that helped me try to discern what God was calling me to do because my path was a little different. I was ministerially inclined. I had been a pastor prior to seminary. I loved the Lord. I loved church. I was a PK. I thought I was going to be a pastor. So in many respects, I had the marks of other students on me. Had academic prowess. People were trying to get me to do PhD programs in Bible or theology. But I also had this burning around the music, and classmates could see that. PhD students could see that. Last story I'll share. This guy, I don't remember his name, but this cat, I was playing a meet and greet for students for PhD perspectives at Emory. So you all know the GDR, or if you don't know, if you're a prospective student. So the graduate division of religion is where the PhD students go. And once they're there, they then work with Candler MDiv students and teach, etc. And I hadn't met this guy from around the way. And I knew that prior to his PhD life, he had been a musician. And in his 20s, he'd gone around and I think a rock band and would sleep on pool tables. And he just did the whole thing before he decided to go into the academy. So we had really raw conversations because, in a sense, we were going opposite directions. He was going from music into the academy. I was going from what I thought was going to be a full on career in the academy into music. But I was struggling and I was wrestling. And I had all this training and interest in academic work, but I also wanted to play music. And I really was at a crossroads. And this brother said to me, "Hey man, if I were you, I'd pick the music." And it was an offhanded comment. It was at a Smooth's event. He was then went on to talk to whomever. I went back to the piano to keep playing for the cocktail hour. But that comment stuck with me. And it was just another moment of being seen, of being encouraged as I continue to work out what God had for me. So independent studies with professors, taking PhD courses while at MDiv, playing gigs, having people come out to gigs, praying over me, praying with me, giving me comments like this. All of this cohered to help with my discernment about a way that I could forge a path that would bring together my pastoral care, my academic training, and my artistic practice in a fulsome way.
Julian, one of the things I'm hearing from your story is trusting God and letting go. And I think one of the really interesting but also hard things about seminary, grad school in general, is that students come in here with a plan. They come in here and they think they know what comes next. And for some of them, that's true. They stay on track and they go into candidacy. Um, but for those who start to feel like their interests may be leading them a different way,
Mm-hmm.
what advice would you give them to help muffle all the noise and find their center and find their way to
Mm-hmm.
go? Because there's a lot of fear with letting go of one's plans and one thinks their future will look like.
Yes, there is. And this is a real conundrum right now in theological education because cats are coming in and they're learning a lot of specialized skills. I mean, if you come for an MDiv program at Candler, you're going to learn a lot about technical details of how the Hebrew Bible was put together and how the patristics thought about the councils that would lead to the Nicene Creed and, and the Chalcedon Council. You're going to learn a lot of particular details that matter to still live bodies of faith. And yet, that's not necessarily commensurate with what's possible for you as a job on the outside of school. So it's a unique blend because in many other fields, you go and learn all the specialized skill, you're then going to come out and still be able to find a job. Lord knows AI is even disrupting that even more. So it's just it's a complicated journey. But one thing I'm really passionate about, and the reason I keep returning to do these calls is I see the power of really honest prayer. Really honest prayer. I said that once on a podcast. I'll say it here again. Honest prayer, full throated, sobbing on the page if you're journaling, prayer before God. God, what is going on? And in that, I started to see what the Spirit was saying to me. And so I commend that to you as you may have shifting interests to stay in touch with those shifting interests. Another thing I'll say is don't give in to complaining. Oh man, I, I hear a lot of complaining. I had a when you came in. Um, why are we why are we doing this? This doesn't make sense. This conversation happened with Kendall Solon, who still teaches there, and he gave me the juice once at lunch, and it was so helpful. He said a lot of he was talking particularly about MDiv students, but I think it pertains to anybody coming into seminary education. Over pizza, he said, a lot of cats come for an MDiv thinking that they're going to buy a car, but they instead walk away with a bag containing a muffler, a steering wheel, and four tires. And they're frustrated because they thought they were walking away with a car that they could drive, but they instead are walking away with a bag of auto parts. That conversation illuminated so much. Part of the reason I think people complain was because they were looking for sometimes more synchronicity between disciplines that doesn't exist because of different formations from different pastors or different professors, different areas, the guilds that people come from care about different ends. And so it can be confusing to think like, well, I just heard this in theology, and now I'm going over here to Bible, and now I'm hearing that, and I'm going over here to pastoral care, I'm hearing that, and this is my con ed site, my field placement for prospective students, where you're going to go and work in a prison or work in a church somewhere, and it doesn't necessarily all line up. You have to do some of that synthesizing work. And hearing that kind of comment, that kind of model of auto parts versus a car gave me more clarity about what was at stake in this process. Not only did I have to pray honestly and pay attention to shifting spirits within about where am I going, who am I, what is God calling me to do, and how do I monetize it, right? But number two, I had to think, what is the through line that I can draw between these fields? Because the last thing I'll say is it is a real shame to me, to be honest, when people are like, whew, glad that class is done. Whew, I'm glad I'm out of this school. Whew, that's a shame to me. I understand people have reasons. It's hard. You got debt, you have kids, you have all this. But you are spending precious years of your life, either first career or second career or third career. You're spending precious years of your life spending time thinking about God in this deep way, this rigorous way, learning all kinds of new ideas. Don't let that go to waste. Complaining is a way that can go to waste. uh, Not taking full advantage of opportunities. Professors want to hear more than just about, did I get an A? They would love to talk to you about what they're writing about. But I would hear time and again just how rare it was when I would just drop in and just shoot the breeze with folk because I was just interested in what they were studying. And I learned so much in that regard too. So those are the three things I'd say. Pray earnestly, figure out how God's calling you to put together the auto parts of your degree and not, a fully formed car. And then lastly, don't waste anything that you're learning. Them white men that you got to study from Europe, even if you're critiquing them, you're pushing against them. That is part of the exercise. That's part of the working out. That field that may feel far afield from what you care about. You don't care about no Bible. You care about pastoral care, being with folk crying. What's going on in Bible? The muscles that you're learning, studying how the Old Testament was put together and why it's dying. That's going to help you with the folk who are crying and dying in front of you. So on and so forth.
That's all beautiful advice. I feel like I need a moment to take it in too. I almost wish I would have heard this prior to my third year, like my first year coming into Candler, of that idea of the auto parts. You've mentioned a couple professors and a couple classes, specifically the South Africa trip. One thing I like to ask is if there was a class you could go back and relive. Maybe it wasn't necessarily your favorite one, it could be your favorite one, or maybe it was one of those classes that you wish you would have gotten a little bit more out of. Which
Hmm.
class would it be?
Awesome question. Emmanuel Larte's interfaith pastoral care class. I really wish I had dug in more into that. At the time, I was a little more guarded about hearing from the imams and the rabbis that came to speak to us. We had a Ifa priestess, I think, come in. Yeah, that's the class. And I just struggle with really how to show up fully in that one. I had to take that as part of my MDiv training. I'm so glad I did. But now in retrospect, I wish I had paid more attention to what Larte was trying to form in us. And here's what was deep. Larte is a Methodist pastor, has been that faithfully. A lot of professors aren't pastors anymore. They might have been still pastored, at least at the time when I was with him. He was comfortable bringing in a queer imam and a rabbi and an Ifa priestess to talk to us. And he still consulted with the fundamentalists back in Ghana that he knew or maybe was a part of way back when, decades ago. His understanding of being capacious towards people despite enduring lines of difference was just bar none for me. And I remember it was one of the last conversations in seminary because I put this class off until the end. So one of the last conversations, and he said to me, I asked, how do you do that? How do you have such a wide reach, such an ability to accept so many different kinds of people? And just boiled down to two words. He said, follow Jesus. A Bible school, a Sunday school, a vacation Bible school answer. And yet, of course, it's in the simplicity of it all that there was such depth. So Emmanuel Arte, for sure. That stands out to me, but it was hard also because that was a hard question because I want to basically relive all of my Canada class. Everyone I loved. I learned something in everyone. I just considered it a playground. And I'm not saying that just, rah, rah. I genuinely enjoyed the learning process from start to finish. Yeah. But Larte, that brother's a Yoda.
He's great. One of my biggest regrets is going to be graduating and never having been able to take a class with him.
Mhm.
But one of the things my friends and I joke about seminary in general is imagine studying something that won't give you an existential crisis. Because seminary and theology is just so personal.
Yes.
It's one of the things that we were also talking about was another set of alumni was that the difference between theology and other fields of study is that it's so transformative.
Yes.
If you're doing it correctly, you should not leave the same way you
That's
entered.
right. That's right. Say that again.
If you're doing it correctly, you should not leave the same way you entered. But one of the really important things to be able to withstand this season of change, which you have alluded to throughout your answers, is the importance of community
Yes.
in order to remind you who you are and keeping yourself centered.
Mhm.
So, what advice do you have about to build community during such a challenging season?
Yeah. Share about what you're learning with people around you. They may not understand all the ins and outs of Schleiermacher or the Vulgate or deliberative theology versus lived theology, whatever. One, it's a good challenge because one issue, even if you're just at the MDiv level and you feel like you don't know that much versus PhDs, you know a lot more than a lot of folk in the pews. And that can lead to an air of superiority, which of course can beget supremacy. But if you work on translating what it is you've learned, into language that they can understand. I don't care what you're studying. It could be super weird declensions in Greek. If you understand some way to explain that to somebody else, it creates more intimacy, which is ideally what this whole thing should be doing. It should, I realized sometime through that my MDiv training was creating more intimacy with God and others and myself and more compassion. So that's one thing I would say about community. Don't let MDiv or whatever you study create a moat between you and those outside of your fortress. Share. Another thing, and this is just a story, is keep things spiritual with your community. It can be easy to just talk ideas, flatten everything out, make God just an object of study. But God is alive. And those who knew you before seminary can help you continue in the life of God, not just in the study of God. So, by that, to illustrate, one of the most profound books I read during seminary was Confessions by St. Augustine. And there's this section at the end. He's gone through this harrowing story, confessing all that he's moved through, his time in the brothels, his time with all these ideologies, and then all of a sudden he feels seized by God. And after this time of being seized by God, he ends up having this beautiful explanation of the Trinity and of time. And it's just, I mean, soaring thinking. And I was so overwhelmed at some point, either in the book on the Trinity, the chapter on the Trinity, or the chapter on time. I was so overcome. I'm sitting there reading. My wife is sitting next to me studying in her first year of med school. And I just say, Bae, can you just pray for me? I don't know what, but just please pray for me right now. And I don't remember what she prayed, but I remember that she prayed. Thank God for a praying wife. That moment linked us together in a really precious way. I didn't even know what I needed prayer for. I just knew that Augustine was speaking to me through the seminary experience in such a profound way that I had to go before God, and not just by myself, but with another who notably wasn't in the program. So, in addition to being with others, letting others speak the truth over you who are in your program, studying with others, taking your headphones off, and actually, communicating with others. So, too, is it important to take your headphones off, so to speak, with those who aren't in the program and let them come near God with you. The book Janessa is called Confessions by St. Augustine.
You mentioned making sure that you stay connected to those outside seminary as well. And I
Mm-hmm.
think music is probably one of the ways you've been able to do that because music should be universal and it should reach not just those in seminary, but those outside. How have you been able to mix what you've learned in seminary, that intimacy you've developed with God and with those around you into your music?
The first album I ever of original music that I recorded was in an independent study with Greg Ellison during my second year. So I read Confessions the first year. The second year, I was so moved by uh, by that experience reading Confessions. Greg Ellison suggested, well, let's do an independent study. We did meditations. I just took a few chapters or paragraphs from Confessions, I meditated on them, and he said, your assignment, instead of a paper, is to write a song. I did 5 to 7 of those and made a little EP, made a little record, and we would just listen to the song and talk about it. That was the project. That was the assignment. That was the class. And that was life changing. In another class, I wrote on Job 19. And out of that, I then wrote a song called Plea. And I presented that in class. Um, I did a class with sociologist Dr. Nicole Phillips, and in that wrote a final paper on gospel and the memory of gospel. here in Chicago, my hometown. That would then inform the music I'd write. Hey, everybody, y'all calling in from all over the world. Nice to meet you. Um, but that would inform what I would then write. And so the list goes on of insights from various kinds of classes. Gabrielle, I see you. I'm in Chicago too. Uh, yeah, so no, I make reps that do the same thing. I meditate on passages of books, my own writing, and then I write. I can take from scripture and then write congregational songs. I take from my master's thesis on what makes wordless improvisation a sight for the divine. And I try to take solos on stage that way. And then also the nimbleness that I cultivated throughout seminary has allowed me on any kind of setting to just constantly pull from this library I have in my head. So in an interview, I may quote something from the second century. I may quote something from the spirituals. I may quote something from post-war German theologians, whatever. I'm doing all that kind of work, and I'm able to do that stage or in an interview with a fan afterwards. I'm praying with fans in pastoral settings. And then I'm in churches a lot of times too, preaching and sharing through my contemplative ministry. And because there was so much studying and note taking, I'm able to just pull from that, both in the musical moment, a song I might reference, rest in peace, Dr. Jimmy Abington, who I was a research assistant for. He taught me a lot about Black church music and how to thread the needle between different traditions. So I'm pulling from his example all the time, and pulling from the depth of everybody else. I mean, the list, I would be here all day talking about the different ways. So those are just some of the tidbits, but it's been an incredibly formative time to be able to create in such a way that I can draw in these folk and create from joy. Joy, yo. I had joy in camera. My soul got happy at New Bethel AME where I did my internship. And I bring that on stage. You feel me? And it's just dope.
Before we wrap things up, is there any advice you have for current Candler students, or I see we have a lot of prospective students,
Yeah.
either before they start their seminary
Mhm.
career or as they're somewhere in the middle of it?
Oh man, if you have yet to come to seminary, I pray that at some point you cry. I heard that recently from Ellen Davis. She's a Hebrew Bible scholar at Duke. And she said before she started her master's training, somebody said in that first week of orientation, if you move through this program without crying, you've missed the point. And I underscore that to the max. I pray, Diana, like you said, that your studies, that even your essays before you come, that they help you really sit before God. There's a cover of Confessions, the version I have from Oxford University Press, where Augustine has his head in his hands on the cover, crying. That's the posture he has. And I don't think that's incidental. My hope is that your time at Candler or wherever you go is one that doesn't make you just depressed. That might happen. That's not what I wish on you. I do wish, however, that you're able to weep and experience Jesus weeping, either over the atrocities that you study, ways that scriptures have been misappropriated to further colonialism and imperialism and every other ism. Maybe you cry over something that's just so good in your soul that God is exposing to you through your studies. You cry for somebody else, somebody who you needs to hear what you're hearing in some liberating class. That you cry because you experienced Jesus, the one who wept at the tomb of his cousin. Whatever it is, I pray that you are able to experience God in those tears and let those tears be a map for the joy that God has before you. That's the main thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say is know that you're not going to seminary just to uh, get a job, but also get a job. Get a job, G. I mean, seminary can be a time where people feel that they're just working out ideas. It's an advanced, sophisticated Bible study. It's a time to further undergrad, so on and so forth. And then you come out with no job prospects. Some of that's because of the market and just how complicated it is for people to make living wages in ecclesial ministry. So I don't want to trivialize that. But it also has to do with the fact that sometimes we may not be thinking about monetizing our work, and we end up moving through, focused on the ideas, and the conveyor belt at some point stops, and then we're left with our hands in the air. As you go through, keep an eye on the study and reading these granularly written texts. But then on the other hand, keep an eye on the job market. Pay attention. What are other cats doing? What are alumni doing? If they're not in pastoral ministry, what are they doing? If they are in pastoral ministry, how are they managing maybe a 2 point charge in the UMC church or a 3 point charge? Are they all working at big churches with a lot of uh, wealthy congregants? If they're working in rural context, how are they getting by? Pay attention to that. Pay attention to the lifestyles people have, the decisions that they've made. Figure out who you can talk to. Alumni will shoot straight with you, talk about debt we've taken on, decisions we've taken on to move our families, to downsize our homes, to leave 6 figure jobs, whatever it is folk have done to pursue this education. They'll talk to you. And as they talk, listen and pay attention to what is moving in you, because that can give you insights on how you can have a career afterwards. There's so many ways we can be creative with our training here, but we got to listen and watch and pray.
Julian, all your words have been beautiful and so insightful. I know I've received so much, and I can't wait for those who are listening now or will be listening later get to see all your wisdom and all your advice, and I appreciate your time. I
Oh,
also thank everyone who's listening to us right here now and live. We will transition to a live Q&A with Julian, which will be off camera, so I know that you can ask anything you want. But yes, thank you so much, Julian.
thank you, Diana. Fantastic questions. And to everybody watching this, much love to you. God is with you. Peace.